right, all you Vedantic fans, all 12 of you. Ever since I turned my business podcast into one dedicated to this timeless philosophy, well, I think it was an unexpected turn for many listeners. But the 12, 15, actually on Instagram, I think it's around 300 views, which is quite unexpected. This 1 in 10,000 people find this philosophy interesting. It becomes the most relevant thing to our lives. And that's because Vedanta is a manual for living. But very few people, myself included, early in my life, ever want to read the manual. You just want to open the box. You want to get right to that rhythm of you and that device and start pressing buttons, hitting the power button, and plugging things in. And reading the manual is never fun. I think the 1 in 10,000 that find this philosophy, that take to this philosophy, that find it interesting, a common pattern that I see is they've been through suffering, maybe significant suffering. That's been the case for me in my life leading up to discovering the profundity of this philosophy. But I think there's more to it than just suffering leads to salvation. Because I think when you zoom out, that does seem to happen quite often. But when you zoom in, I feel like there's something in between. And that something in between seems to be this recognition of, I better fucking read the manual. That suffering often comes from our own doing, our own actions, feeling like we're pushing the pedal forward, but the car is going in reverse, feeling like we tried it our way 12 times, 17 times, 75 times, and it all seems to be crumbling. Trial and error is a phenomenal way to get to the place where you say, okay, I probably should just read the manual because this thing ain't working as advertised. The average American is subjected to 2,800 ads a day. And those ads tell you that you deserve happiness. You deserve everything you want. And everything that you want is just on the other side of wanting it bad enough. It gives a whole lot of different paths to get to that state, most of which are actually going to put you in reverse, take you further away from that state of happiness, or it is complete hand waving and it has no real inherent happiness in it whatsoever, but it's going to beat you with this message over and over and over and over again, that if you treat yourself, well, you'll have a nice little tiny dose of happiness. But those advertisements are right. You do deserve happiness. That is what the oldest philosophy in the world in terms of continuous study within Vedanta has been saying for thousands of years. Nearly every religion says the same thing. You do deserve that. Or some of them take a nice little caveat and say, if you do the right things, you deserve it. Vedanta is more like the manual and just says like, oh, this is supposed to work perfectly, harmoniously, and happiness is your natural state. And if you're finding yourself a few steps removed from that, it's because you just aren't doing it right. Those advertisements, or maybe your own intuition that you should be happy, it is right. But how could we get to where we don't need catastrophic suffering to recognize that maybe I should read the manual? Well, if you're listening to this right now, then you already have some curiosity. Many of you may have already gone through significant suffering to where you have this type of curiosity. But if this is the first video you're watching of the Daily Vedantic, get a brief glimpse of it in your social media feed or on YouTube. There is a much easier, simpler path than having to go through catastrophic tragedy or suffering. And that is to just try it on. Try out the manual. One of the most beautiful things about this manual is you don't need to read it cover to cover to find benefit. It could be one single principle, like wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. Where you write that down, you say, oh, I know that I desire wisdom. Who doesn't? But I've never heard a definition for it. Or I've never heard what it actually means in practice. And that's what it is. The capacity to see the end in the beginning. Can you play out what's about to happen when you make this decision for this job over another? To start some idea you might have entrepreneurially, to get married, to start dating someone, to get a divorce, to go get another six-pack, whatever the decision tree is. Wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. That's just one simple principle in Vedanta, which another term for Vedanta is Sanatana Dharma, which means eternal principles. So within this philosophy of eternal principles, you actually don't need to read it cover to cover. You actually don't need to know anything else than what I just laid down to try it out and see if, well, is that true? Did that help? Did connecting those wires properly on what wisdom is and how to make a wise decision, did that work better than my old model of just kind of like jamming a couple wires together, but not knowing exactly how they should go? If it does, then you take another page, take in another episode, or ideally, you graduate to one of my favorite on-ramp books by my teacher, Swami Parthasarathi, is Holocaust of Attachment. And you heard that title right, Holocaust of Attachment. Why attachment and desire are just so tragically consequential in our lives that he titled it The Holocaust of Attachment. That's an hour-long read. And you could actually just read the first 5 pages and see if it speaks to you. You could check out another one of these episodes. You could start a ChatGPT conversation around Vedanta and what this philosophy says. But as you start to gather, and I will say, finding the right teacher is critical, because it's like reading a manual that's exceptionally well written and a manual that is kind of, all over the place. If you can find a teacher that's truly established in this wisdom and also is able to articulate it really well, it's a miracle when you find that. And if you are able to find 1 or 2 things after a 15-minute investment that might cascade through so many different areas of your life in a profoundly helpful way, that's a hell of a use of 10 to 15 minutes. And then you do another 10 or 15 minutes, see if there's something else, and another, and another. And maybe you'll stack all of these together, and maybe it's a very small amount of time in your life of reading the manual, and then you push forward in the car pedal. The car doesn't just go forward, but it is like, oh my God, it's not even a car. This thing is an F-16 that I never knew I had. Your life becomes so streamlined, so nearly effortless, even though people around you think that you're working your ass off. It feels so effortless because it's all just working. That is what happens when we take to the manual for something. And that's what happens in our lives when you take to something as impactful as a manual for living, which is the aphorism for what Vedanta is. That is today's episode on the Daily Vedantic, a daily guide to this manual for living and living life well. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Daily Vedantic. This reflection is part of a free repeating 2-year course in Advaita Vedanta. Rooted in the timeless wisdom of the Upanishads, arguably the oldest philosophical texts on earth, you can begin with episode 1, which gives the 15-minute overview of the whole philosophy of Vedanta, or you can join the journey with any episode at any point. But the critical aspect of this course of understanding and mastering anything is to study and reflect, even for 10 to 15 minutes on the timeless each day, preferably at the start of your day. As is said in this philosophy, reflection is 100,000 times as powerful as listening. So listen, journal, sit with, discuss these concepts, or ask questions at thedailyvedantic.com with our AI-powered chatbot informed by about 700 episodes here, as regularly as one can if you want to see clarity and peace almost effortlessly unfold in your daily life. And if it doesn't result in a near immediate increase in clarity and peace, then toss aside and feel free to never listen again. One of the things that you might notice is after 7 or 8 days in a row, this doesn't feel like a discipline. This feels like a visit with a best friend to dive into the timeless with daily reflection. Within a few days, it becomes one of your favorite parts of the day. You can also find out more, including news about in-person events in Los Angeles and beyond, at the Daily Vedantic on Instagram or through our weekly newsletter at thedailyvedantic.com. Additionally, check out the links in our show notes for more resources like the books that are mentioned most frequently in the episodes, including Vedanta Treatise, perhaps the simplest and most straightforward read on this philosophy I've ever come across. Until next time, and from the entire team that works on the Daily Vedantic project, thanks for listening.